All right. Perhaps. Okay. We trust that other latecomers will open the door quietly. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, a very good afternoon, rather good evening to you all. And welcome to this panel. You've seen the title. It's about the Middle East crisis from the Levant to the Black Sea. We are very happy to have Candid Foundation from Germany, a partner of the New Strategy Center in organizing this panel. My name is Doru. I am a member of the Scientific Council of NSC. And before anything else, I'd like to kindly invite you to consider, to have a small exercise of imagination. Look at the map as we know it, the global map, and you will see the Middle East a little bit to the right of center. Now make an effort and put it in the middle of the map as we see it from here. Don't ask the Japanese or the Aussies to play that, because they won't put us there. Anyway, so if you look at the map this way, and you put the Middle East in the center of the map, which is in the middle, you need a very small effort to reach the conclusion that the area actually hides a core of events, a core of developments, a core of creativity, think about religion, and a core of destruction. Think about what happened last night, or 2 days ago, or whenever, for the last many years. So the point is that if we deal with the Middle East and if we look at the Middle East in this way, it is almost impossible not to find out that there are strategic reverberations all around it, and many of them come to our area. That is my whole contribution to the discussion. But because I can't just stand up and leave, I'd like you to allow me to recall that perhaps you've read the program of the forum, and you may have seen that we have distinguished guests that are among the best experts in the topic that we are going to address. There are some sub-issues to this topic. I will read them very quickly, just to remind you and everybody else, including the distinguished guests, some questions. And we would be excited to hear their contributions to the answers to these questions. So, how do overlapping crises in Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran affect European and Black Sea security? Does diplomacy have a future in the Palestinian-Israeli file? Iran's nuclear ambitions and proxy network are threatening stability and security in regions beyond its area. What can be done to face these challenges? And two more. Have Russia's setbacks in Syria and the Black Sea diminished its influence on the Levant? If yes, is this an irreversible trend? Is it going to stay that way? And again, or further, and if it doesn't stay that way, is there anybody else to come to influence what's going on in that area? Because it matters for us here as well. And last but not least, are there any prospects for an Israeli-Turkish compromise? You notice that the questions are different in scope, are different in the targets. Our guests were not asked to pick one, but they may do that if they wish, or they may give an answer that crosses about around all the borders. Now, you remember very familiar, I think, to the may you live in interesting times, don't you? Of course, everybody does. Well, as usual, time is not a friend of ours. So I'm afraid we'll have to be brisk, short, crisp, and punchy. And of course, creative. A plot revealed. I have agreed with our guests that their addresses would be basically looking forward in order to try to find something that can be done about those issues. It may be crazy ideas. Hopefully they will be crazy because they will be exciting and inciting. So without further ado, as they say, let me give the floor to Daniel GERLACH. He is the director of the Candid Foundation, our partners, and he is a hands-on expert in situations in the Middle East largely. Daniel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador Costa. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to keep this intervention very short so we can have time for the discussion. Forward-looking. The Middle East is conceived and perceived by many in Europe as a continuous source of crisis. And when we talk about repercussions and reverberations of the crises in the Middle East, of course, this terminology reflects this view. Now, I'm not going to bore you with history, but I'm a historian, and I want to remind us that the Middle East has been, for most of its history, at the receiving end of crisis, because its geographic location, and the Levant, of course, is part of it, like invited empires from Asia, from Europe, and these empires basically left their marks there. And so this shaped the mentality of the region in a certain way, in a positive and in a negative way. My assumption is that every taxi driver and every shawarma dealer on the streets of Beirut has a larger geopolitical radar than an MP in Europe. It's not that people have a better understanding of geopolitics. It's not that they have the right historical conclusions. But people are conditioned that what happens in China, in the United States, in Europe, will have sooner or later consequences and repercussions for them. So I'm not trying to be apologetic with regard to the region, nor overly optimistic. But I think if we talk about forward-looking, constructive engagement for Europe is not a matter of choice. It's an obligation because the region is a natural influence of Europe, but we are also a region of natural influence for the Middle East. And only if we accept both realities and we feel the repercussions of this, we can constructively engage. What I see today is the emergence of 4 nation states whose nation state building has not been completed. One of them is Israel. Israel's coming to a nation state has not been completed because Israel has not defined once for all its borders, has not answered central questions about what it wants to be as a nation state, has for reasons of strategic opportunity, left some of those answers open. The other is Syria, which has borders, but is deeply fragmented socially, also geographically, with regard to its societal model. The nation state of Syria is not completed. The third one is Lebanon, which is a state without an efficient and effective government, with many domestic problems, with many positions and many perspectives. And the other one is Palestine. The Palestinian reality, the state of Palestine, was not created by Palestinians. It was created by the occupation. It was created by the reality that the occupation of this land has emerged. And as Europeans, we have recognized, and many of Europeans, not all of us, have recognized that this is a reality and that there is no alternative for the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict but a self-determination for both people. I think if we as Europeans want to constructively engage in this, we need to understand this reality that either all four nation states in the region emerge and complete their birth and become stable, or none of them will. Because the well-being, the survival, the existence and the identity of these four nation states, and one of which is not internationally recognized probably by the United Nations, but still I think represents a nation. If either of these four states wants to live in peace and in stability, the others have to. If we look at if we talk about security and our interests, we have to reconcile it with the interest of these four nations. And how that can be done is, of course, a matter of international political will. It is a matter of economic engagement, of pursuing interest, and at the same time remaining a fair dealer, and of understanding that this Levant is part of our European Mediterranean neighborhood and also part of our European identity. Again, one word on history, since we are in Romania. I think that the post-Ottoman era is not over yet. I think that the nation-building process in the region has not been completed. It started in 1877 with the independence of this country from the Ottoman Empire, if we leave the Greek example aside. This process of nations based on an ethnic, religious, whatever common destiny, perception of the destiny, has started and it's still going on. And I think should take a fresh approach at it and look at it from a more positive and constructive perspective than now. That's my opening, and we can probably discuss this into detail later.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Our next guest is Mr. Ariel EZRAHI. He's a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council, and he's dealing with the Middle East programs in this capacity.
Thank you, Ambassador, and it's great to be here. It's also my first time in Romania, and I see it as a great honor. And thank you to the Candid Foundation for organizing this together with you and the forum. You know, I have to say, I know we shouldn't look at history too much in this conversation, because we said we'd be forward-looking, but I sometimes, although I wasn't born during Ottoman times, I'm not that old, I sometimes wonder what it was like in those times, because I'm not so sure that we've fared better today than we were in those times. At least Jamal's people and my people would not be fighting at that point, and I often question where we've gotten to today, but that's another story. Just taking up something on from what Daniel GERLACH said earlier about the nations not having finished their nation building yet, and this is, I think, one common issue with this, and this was mentioned, is what's the impact of Iran. So I think if we see one common thread between the issues we see in Lebanon and Palestine and Syria, and also in Israel, it's the Iranian link. I won't blame everything on Iran, on the Iranian regime, certainly not the people. They're not at fault. But I would say that we see a thread here of destabilization by the Iranian Islamic regime in the region. And I think that is partially only possible because of what Daniel said, which is that these states have not fully formed yet. Certainly, if I speak for my own country, I'm from Israel, you know, we have a leadership now which seems to be bent on destroying the democratic foundations, institutions of the country, which is not really giving a very positive building block for making peace with its neighbors, principally the Palestinians, but others as well. And I think as long as Israel is still in turmoil, then it's going to be very, very difficult for it to reach out and to make concessions that are necessary for Israelis and Palestinians to live side by side in dignity. The other thing I want to say is that the leaderships, again, this goes back to what Daniel was saying, I think the leaderships, the people deserve better leadership in these countries than they've had. And unfortunately, and back to what you said, Ambassador, about, you know, what's the role of the EU or what in Europe and how does this affect, I think if sometimes when the children don't manage to get along, you need a responsible adult to help shepherd the way, or at least to help guide them. And this is not to take away blame for our own problems in the region, but I certainly don't see that responsible adult right now in the region. I certainly don't see that type of leadership coming from the power brokers at the moment. And I think, so we have a very tragic situation at the moment where whether it's Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Israel, massive domestic challenges and issues unhelped by some of the great external powers. I think there's a great opportunity for the European Union and Europe in general to play a bigger role, and I think for a potentially future US administration to play a constructive role, and others as well. I think I'll leave it at that for now. The last thing I just want to say is, you know, we know that in the Middle East, it's one of the regions with the least amount of intra-regional trade. The potential is enormous. There's initiatives and projects like IMEC, the India-Middle East corridor, that are often talked about. And if we look at some of the challenges facing the region, we were just talking about climate issues and global warming. In the Middle East, global warming is more than twice the global average. If we don't work together on these issues to overcome what nature has in store for us because of human activity, then we will all perish. And it won't matter if we're Jewish or Muslim or Christian at that point, because it just doesn't, it won't make a difference. So I think looking forward, we have to work together. We have no choice but to work together. How do we do that? I hope to certainly learn from my colleagues on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. EZRAHI. I can't help it. Climate change? That's fake, my dear. Sorry, the next guest, Mr. Jamal NUSSEIBEH. It's a board member of Middle East Policy Council. He's a Palestinian-American scholar. And among other things, he's also a co-author of the Palestinian Armistice Agreement. Shoot.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's not yet an agreement, but thank you very much for having me.
I'm optimistic.
So I'm Palestinian, and you know, I'm the youngest of these nation states in some ways, but also the oldest. Arguably, we were Palestine at the time of the Romans. No, but I wanted to start out by saying, I mean, there aren't many people in this room, and I think my first point is to explain why this is important. Why should people who are at a security conference in the Balkans be listening to us? Because of the fact that, first, with the massive use of firepower and technology and everything else that Israel has employed or deployed against the Palestinian population over the past couple of years, and it is not history because it's still unfortunately ongoing in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, elsewhere, Israel has basically blown up the foundations of the international system on which we all depend to survive, and which we will rely on, we everywhere, we the Palestinians, we the Germans, we the Romanians, we the Turks. And this is not something that can be ignored, nor is it something that can be put aside and maybe come back to later. It is the elephant in the room. And Israel is essentially a pariah state and should be treated as such. And yet, its ministers are welcomed and feted. International law, ICC decisions are ignored by European countries. And instead of being sanctioned, Israel is still supported by things like the European Union Association Agreement, visa-free travel, etc., etc. So the second point is systemic issues matter. They matter to all of us. My second point is, it is not something that I, as a Palestinian, can fix alone. We don't expect Ukraine to stand alone against Russia as a pariah state. But we have been standing pretty much alone against Israel and under occupation for decades. Israel has been violating UN Security Council resolutions since 1967, since it occupied East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. And nothing has been done about it. When Russia entered Ukraine, Crimea, so Ukraine, in the first time in 2014, the reaction was muted. It was a kind of, what can we do? Well, one of the reasons for that is because of the fact that unless you apply the law equally to everybody, it is no longer law. And we need to rely on these laws because these laws are what will protect the European borders today and in the future. So this is not something that we can solve alone. It is something that needs others to step in and help. I heard the former Prime Minister of Russia earlier today talking about Putin and saying, look, Putin, President Putin, does whatever Europe has allowed him or the West has allowed him to get away with. He has increased. Every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, he does a little bit more and he gets away with it. I argue that Israel has done the same with us and with its other neighbors. It has first occupied, then killed, then occupied a bit more, then killed a bit more, and now it has headed into full ethnic cleansing, genocide, if you will, depending. I don't want to argue about the terms, nor do I want to put anyone off. But call it what you will, 100,000 people more or less killed in the last couple of years, and it is ongoing, meaning that it's not over. And I'm aware that Romania has taken a seat on the Board of Peace. We were all having hope for a more positive outcome from a Trump administration's engagement with the situation. Unfortunately, it has stalled and been forgotten. And that, from where I sit, is worse than depressing, because I'm still watching 10 people being killed in Gaza every day without food, without medicine, and without shelter. So, but I want to go forward. Right. And as you mentioned, we, with a group of other Palestinians, we've tried to think about how we could get out of this and move forward. One of the principal parts of this, which was actually mentioned by the Trump plan and many others, is the notion of international forces. So, of course, there is no way that the Palestinians can protect themselves. There is no way that the Israelis really can defend themselves safely or sufficiently for them to feel safe. And therefore, we need international forces to come in and protect Palestinians and Israelis, not just in Gaza, but everywhere in the occupied territories and between Israel and Palestine. Why do I say this? Because we're talking about a situation where we need to find a sense of calm and peace so that we can change the leadership that you're talking about, Ariel. And that won't come from fear. That will come from hope. And that hope only comes when I know that I can survive tomorrow, that my children can go to school tomorrow, and that I don't have to be sort of worried about not only that, but obviously all the economic insecurity that comes along with this occupation. I'm looking at the time, so I will hand it on. But there is hope, and I will say that, by the way, you know, part of what the Candid Foundation has been doing, and there is a lot of work. There are many Israelis who would agree with me, and Ariel just mentioned it as well. We need somebody to step in, not just for our sake, but because the instability in our region will spread. It has already spread, and it will hit you in Europe. We are on the borders, on the edge of the White Sea, as I believe we used to call it in Arabic as well, and you're on the Black Sea. So let's work together, please.
Right, and when white meets black, the color is gray, and gray is not something we wish. We don't want. Last but definitely not least, our guest is Ambassador Jamal ILDEM. He's an old friend of NSC. I don't think I need to introduce him. He's been in panels twice already today.
This is the third one.
That's the third one. But trust me, he's one of the most experienced and learned and scholared and kind diplomats I've met in my almost 30 years of diplomatic work. And kindness is not something that is very familiar with the diplomats. Trust me on that too. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Well, thank you for the compliments. After such learned and distinguished speakers, to add my voice would be a challenge, but I will try to do so. Now, since the title of the panel is talking about Levant to Black Sea, I was coming to Black Sea Balkans Forum many times. And I was insisting at that time that we shouldn't focus only to the Black Sea region as an isolated geography, but a geography interconnected with other geographies, definitely with the Mediterranean and Middle East. And that's why I was giving the example of Syria Express when Russia invaded, annexed Crimea. It was to project power to the south. So it shows the connection between the geographies. Now, coming to the problems of the region, I very much appreciate the positive tone that Mr. EZRAHI adopted in making his remarks. And it is good to look to the future with this positive orientation. Nevertheless, we should also draw lessons from today and from recent past. And I can only subscribe fully to what Mr. NUSSEIBEH has said regarding the ongoing tragic situation in Gaza. I will give you one important anecdote that I collected in my recent engagement with different groups. I was invited to Como to attend a meeting organized by one German think tank there. And it was the perspectives of Global South. And the representatives of the Global South were extremely critical about the stand that Europeans, the West in general, was demonstrating. On the one hand, to be united, to be against what Russia has been doing in Ukraine, violating blatantly international norms and rules, and for the same West to be silent with ongoing human suffering in Gaza. And now, as the previous speakers have already alluded to, it is not only Gaza, but other geographies as well, other countries like Lebanon as well. I think one may say power politics is back. Rules-based international order has collapsed, so what's the point? But if we are going to have a proper order for the future, we should agree on the fundamentals to respect to the sovereignty, territorial integrity of countries, respect the dignity of human beings, and not to resort to use of force or threat of using force. These are fundamental things. And we cannot compartmentalize and say, well, these are valid for certain conflicts, but not for others. Then the West would be accused of double standards and selective use of rules and principles. We should avoid that in order to maintain credibility of the Western community. As to your question regarding Turkey-Israel relations. Well, we have to recall that Turkey was among the first to recognize Israel, the state of Israel, as an independent state, and we have maintained very good exemplary relations until such time that there is a public reaction to any engagement with Israel. That's why we don't have ambassador in Israel. Our relations do not exist almost formally. And it is sad, because if we are going to have a region with cooperation in the center of all activities, from efforts against climate change to migration, energy questions, we need to cooperate. But even today, in a dramatic way, the government decides to change its relationship with Israel, there would be an abundant majority of the population resisting to it. Therefore, first and foremost, the ongoing tragedy should stop, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. Otherwise, we could not have any prospect for the future, prospect for peace in the future, under the shadow of the lingering tragic situation that haunts all of our minds and hearts. Therefore, international community should be more forthcoming in saying what it is in terms of injustice going on. I know that some European countries have a historical baggage to carry, and we all recognize the tragic consequences of past policies, and we sympathize those who suffered. The Jewish people were subjected to such atrocities at the time, but this should not lead those countries to shy away from their responsibility to speak out regarding what is right, what is wrong. So I leave it here.
Thank you. As usual, Ambassador's remarks are encouraging for crosstalk or for being challenged or agreed upon. But actually, I think that everybody's remarks are meant to open a discussion. So I invite you, all of you, if you have any cross remarks, go on with them, but do it also as short as possible so that we perhaps may have other questions around. Yes, Daniel.
I was about to ask Ambassador ILDEM if Turkey considers itself a member of the Global South or a representative of the Global South, but that's a discussion we should probably have later, because this is going too much away from the Levant. Look, I think our fundamental problem, and this refers to what all three of you said, is we are dealing with this region still as if it was not part of the Euro-Mediterranean neighborhood. And why we should change this, I think, is the reason why I think Romania and the southeastern European countries can play an important role to fix this problem. We are looking at Syria through an American lens. President Trump decides that the leadership of Syria is no longer a terrorist organization. End of the discussion. Everyone else follows, and we need the American reassurance, we need the American leadership in order to define our own relationships with the Syrian government. We deal with the crisis in Lebanon as if it was all the result of Iranian meddling in the region. So we take basically an Eastern perspective from beyond the Middle East and say, okay, everything that's happening there is the result of problems that are caused by Iran. That's why we need to address the problem of Lebanon in the Persian Gulf. We're dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian file as if it was an American affair to settle it, and as if America had a greater interest or a greater potential to do this, and leave and delegate the issue of Gaza to a peace board created by President Trump. The only reason why America is accepted as a so-called peace broker is because the Israeli government decided that it wants America to do this, because if the Europeans get involved, it might be less efficient, but also less probably in Israel's favor. Now, unless we understand that this region is part of our neighborhood, and we also translate this into concrete politics, we will not have a role there, and we will be at the receiving end of the problems that emerge from there. I want to say one word about the EDAM Accords, because that's been going around, and now in Germany we even hear conservative politicians saying, yeah, Lebanon will soon join the EDAM Accords. The EDAM Accords, everyone is familiar with what it is, are an optical illusion which does not comply. With all due respect, it's a good thing that it happened, but it's not a model that you can paste on this region. This region cannot be looked at only through the connectivity lens that it might be a good opportunity to transport goods and commodities and oil and gas from the Gulf, from the Persian Gulf through Syria or through Israel or through Jordan to the Mediterranean. All of that could be a consequence of peace and security in the region. But the problems and the interconnection of the problems need to be addressed from a Mediterranean, from a European perspective. And I think this is the leverage what we have here. I would like to invite really the European member states, and I've been studying them across the board with regard to their policies on Israel-Palestine, to overcome their own, selfish considerations. I give you the example of Greece and Turkey. Greece has a population which is very much interested in a peaceful settlement of the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Hence, out of strategic considerations, the Greek government tends to look at it from a geostrategic point of view and balances out with its interest to the gas in the Mediterranean, the competition with Turkey. So this overshadows and overrules and overrides sometimes their policies in the region. We look at, I don't have to start with Germany. Germany is a very special case. But we see that all European member states often have their own selfish reasons why they apply a policy on Israel, Palestine, and the Levant, which does not necessarily serve peace and security in the Levant, but other superior interests. Of course, Russia, Ukraine, and the Israel-Palestinian conflict are deeply connected. And we see that many countries in Eastern Europe, also in the Baltic region, when they look at their relationship to Israel, they would say, like, we need the technology, we need the cybersecurity. We cannot afford to do any peace building in the region. We want to have their support in our confrontation with Russia. And I can give you, like, for every single member state, almost their own, what we call in German, Staatsräson. Every European country has some sort of double standards, and by the way, many of the members of the Global South have them too, have also very high double standards, because they all have their own Staatsräson, regardless if you look to South America or to China or to countries in Africa when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This makes it so complicated, so passionate, but also in the common interest, not only of us in Europe, but of everyone basically, to solve it. Because on the principle, self-determination and two-state solution, most of us actually agree.
Thank you very much. We have Mr. EZRAHI. Yes?
Does anyone want to go first? No, okay.
Here come.
Okay, I wanted to say a few. I'm likely to agree with most of what he says, anyways. I just want to make a few small points. One is, Daniel mentioned the Staatsräson. My recommendation to European audiences is, if you want to stand with Israel's right to exist, with Israel's security, then you can stand with the people of Israel and make a differentiation between the people of Israel and the government of Israel. That would be a recommendation. It was mentioned here about Israeli members of this government being accepted in European capitals. And to be honest, I have an issue with that in the same way that Jamal does, because I believe that this current Israeli government not only does not represent the majority interests of Israel or Israel's interests, but it's obviously doing a lot of damage in Gaza and West Bank and elsewhere. So I would, first recommendation would be to Europeans who do care about Israel and its security and about Palestinian security to make a differentiation, and I know it's not easy, but to make a differentiation between the rotten leadership that's in Israel at the moment and the people. And I can tell you, if there were elections today, this government would be out. Let's see what happens in the coming weeks. That's point number one. And I agree with everything that you said, Ambassador Tacan, as well, about, you know, the tragedies that we're seeing. And I can tell you a lot of Israelis are not happy with this. And I want to give you one example on this. The Israeli government failed the people of Israel on October 7th and in the lead up to October 7th with the terrible massacres that were perpetrated by Hamas. And likewise, it's actually Israeli civil society and individuals that, by the way, on October 7th, stepped up in order to provide assistance when the government was absent and dysfunctional. If I look at the humanitarian crisis in Gaza that Jamal rightly focused on, where once again Israel has its neighbors in Gaza, obviously perpetrating a lot of atrocities, but also failing in the provision of aid. We've seen Israeli individuals and civil society step in. It's not sufficient. They can't do this alone, but I'll give you one example. There's a woman called Alice Miller who is very famous in Israel because she brought a Supreme Court case to challenge the fact that women cannot be pilots in the Israeli Air Force. So she paved the way for female pilots to be in the Israeli Air Force. She then eventually did not finish the course. I recently came across her because I'm part of a humanitarian group for Gaza, and her recent initiative, which she's doing also in cooperation with a Palestinian medical doctor, is to bring reusable hygiene pads to women in Gaza. The Israeli government is not providing such solutions, but we do see, so if we're thinking about the positivity and forward-looking, there's a lot of people in Israel and Palestine, in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Syria, and elsewhere, who I believe would want to see a brighter future together. We see different horizons of that, but it's not enough. And as well as Jamal said, we need external support for this, and we certainly need and deserve a better leadership.
Thank you very much. Yes?
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Just a quick response. What we're seeing in Gaza is not really a humanitarian tragedy. It is a man-made starvation. And it is not something that should be perceived through the eye. Israel is not just not providing sanitary pads. Israel is controlling the access of everything to this Gaza Strip. Therefore, it is preventing the access of sanitary pads, which the whole world is trying to send. Different. Second, this is not only Gaza, and you posed your question, Ambassador, about what's happening in Gaza and so on. This is bigger than Gaza, but it's also bigger than Gaza because I am Gaza. I have family from Gaza. Gaza is part of a larger community. We all feel Gaza. Not as much, of course, as the people who are still there, but I lost cousins in Gaza. So it is part of a Palestinian community which goes back centuries. And we are being wiped out off this map. What remains is something else. Now, the third point is looking forward. There's talk about, Middle East corridors and so on. I think it's great. Economy is necessary, and I want the Palestinians to be able to build a country that they are proud of. And I want to do that as much as possible without help. I want us to build it. I don't want to rely on aid. But in order to get there, to get that economy, we need the politics to be solved. And one of the big mistakes that we have been making, and the outside world has been making, looking at us over the past 30, 40 years, is, oh, we'll get some economy going and we'll leave the politics till later. You need the political structure. You need that Palestinian state that has been recognized. Let that be the beginning, and let it be a framework within which we can build an economy and a society that can thrive with Israel next to us and with the rest of the countries in the region.
Thank you. Ambassador?
Yes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. So,
It's the clock, not me.
first of all, yes, you are right in saying that for many countries, double standards exist. But in terms of creating a new order, and we need it in a ruptured order that we are going through, we should agree on fundamental principles. And I think those principles are clear enough for the West, first and foremost European Union, to show some kind of leadership role to induce others to follow suit in implementing, applying those rules. We cannot just take it casually saying, well, the order is ruptured, so why to bother? I think we have all a responsibility to do so. Also the two-state solution that you referred to. Yes, it is something viable in our minds, but with all the policies implemented right now, the room to achieve results, unfortunately, are getting slimmer and slimmer. Therefore, we cannot wait until these actions on the part of Israel to continue. International community should be more forceful. I don't see United Nations, although the different agencies, institutions are expressing their discontent, but without any result, which unfortunately makes the wider societies to distance itself from the existing international organizations, first and foremost, United Nations. So we have a credibility issue. And second, for what we try to see achieved in the region, we should also give an opportunity for those having a proper government to rule the country and to have all the ability for good governance. If you don't have government, how can you talk about good governance? So these are issues that needs to be tackled in a matter of urgency without further delay, because it's already too late.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm afraid we are also getting rather late in our discussion, unfortunately, because I wish I could pull all of us back in time at around, let's say, 10 o'clock in the morning, and have 2 hours in front of us in order to debate this only topic. There is a huge temptation that I can't resist, another one, which is to draw comparisons between the wars in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine. And I will mention one point, which is security guarantees, because one of you have mentioned that. Fine, we can agree. We have agreed, actually, on a lot of guarantees on paper and on treaties and on the UN Charter and on God knows what else. Where we didn't do that well was enforcing them. The international force that Mr. EZRAHI mentioned, fine, it's excellent. Who? Who is going to go there? Who is ready to do that? And because we have only 2-3 seconds, just 1 or 2 remarks for you to go, and of course for our guests to come back sometime at our debates and think, how come that we talk about unfinished business in state-building institutions when the existing state buildings of institutions are crumbling? starting with multilateral organizations and ending up with democratic systems in many countries, ours included. And if you look at the map again, I asked you at the beginning to imagine something. Now imagine something else. Imagine human capacities of the Israelis and Palestinians coupled with the material resources of the Gulf countries. Note that I didn't say either Arab Gulf or Persian Gulf, because I can't put a slash between them. But I meant both banks of the Gulf. Put them together and imagine what that could bring. This is quixotic, absolutely. As long as the peoples in those areas don't talk to one another more, don't act together, and Jamal mentioned that. I know that Candid is doing things on this, and a lot of other people, and even us here, with the NGOs, which the governments may or may not listen to. It doesn't matter, but we need to do our duty. Thank you very much. I like very much to pontificate. So this is the end of my pontification. Have a great evening, and don't remember that we have another panel right here waiting to start, which is quite exciting too, talking about societal resilience from Ukrainian wartime to European society in the era of full-scale hybrid warfare. And we haven't mentioned hybrid warfare in either of the areas. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for the team who has helped us in securing the technicalities of this meeting. Good night.